Welcome back to CIA Declassified. Today we dive into a modern day tragedy that feels more like a B-movie script than a military operation. The setting is the coastal town of Macuto, Macuto, Venezuela. In May 2020, a small fleet of fiberglass boats approaches the shore. On board are two former American Green Berets and a handful of desperate Venezuelan dissidents. They aren't backed by the full weight of the U.S. Navy. They are backed by a private security contract signed in Florida at a luxury apartment. They believe they are about to topple a government. In reality, they are sailing directly into a trap that the world already saw coming. This is the story of Operation GIDEON. How did a ragtag group of 60 men think that they could take over a country? They started with a name rooted in faith. The name Operation GIDEON was chosen by its mastermind, Jordan Godreau. Goudrea. I believe it's Godreau, the head of Silver Corp USA. It is a reference to the biblical story of Gideon, who led a tiny force of 300 men to victory against a much larger army. Godreau believed that a small elite strike force could spark a mass uprising among the Venezuelan people and military, effectively decapitating the Maduro regime with minimal numbers. The agency watched from the sidelines as the Bay of Piglets unfolded in real time. The operation was governed by a $213 million contract between Silver Corp USA and the Venezuelan opposition, which included a $1.5 million retainer that was reportedly never fully paid. A quote from the Silver Corp General Services Agreement. The service provider will assist Project Group in planning and executing an operation to capture/detain/remove Nicolas Maduro, remove the current regime, and install the recognized Venezuelan President Juan Guaido. Guaido. And some of you may know these names right off the bat and think, how does she not know how to pronounce it? Ladies and gentlemen, this may come as a great surprise, but I haven't paid attention to the news in any way, shape, or form since 2019. The Venezuelan government had thoroughly infiltrated the plot months before it launched Diosdado Cabello, Diosdado and Kebello, a high-ranking official, even went on national television to mock the planners before the boats ever left Colombia. A quote from Jordan Godreau during a May 3rd, 2020 Twitter video. A daring amphibious raid was launched from the border of Colombia deep into the heart of Caracas. Our units have been activated in the south, the east, and the west of Venezuela. End quote. The invading force consisted of just two boats. One was intercepted near Macuto, resulting in 6 deaths. The second was captured further down the coast by local fishermen armed with old pistols. A quote from captured mercenary Luke Denman during his televised interrogation. I was helping Venezuelans take back control of their country. I expected to be paid between $50,000 to $100,000, end quote. The U.S. government officially denied any direct involvement, with President Trump famously stating, "If I wanted to go into Venezuela, I wouldn't make a secret about it. I'd go in with an army," end quote. The Associated Press had published a detailed investigation into the plotters' training camps in Colombia 2 days before the operation actually began, essentially announcing the invasion to the world. Jordan Godreau later sued Juan Guaido for breach of contract, claiming he was left swinging in the wind after the U.S. government and the opposition withdrew their support. The two Americans, Luke Denman and Aaron Berry, were sentenced to 20 years in a Venezuelan prison before being released in a 2023 prisoner swap. Reports suggest the CIA had actually met with Godreau in early 2020, but told him his plan was amateurish and suicidal. Yet they never warned the Venezuelan government of the impending attack. The Silver Court team allegedly expected a massive desertion from the Venezuelan military the moment they touched the sand, a calculation that proved tragically incorrect. Operation Gideon is now studied in military academies as a textbook example of how privatization of regime change can lead to strategic catastrophe. A quote from a 2025 AP report on declassified Trump statements. I authorized covert CIA operations inside Venezuela. We were weighing broader options. End quote. In October 2025, it was officially disclosed that a CIA drone strike had targeted a Venezuelan dock, confirming kinetic CIA involvement separate from the mercenary raid. A quote from the 2021 Vice News investigation. A representative of the CIA approached Godreau, I know I'm butchering the name, everybody, but remember, haven't paid attention to the news since 2019, so I'm going with phonetics. Somewhere on an undisclosed Caribbean island, they brought a clear message: end Operation Gideon. I'll reread that quote since I interjected. It's a quote from a 2021 Vice News investigation. A representative of the CIA approached Godreau somewhere on an undisclosed Caribbean island. They brought a clear message: end Operation Gideon. End quote. By January 2026, Operation Absolute Resolve, a separate unilateral U.S. mission, successfully captured Nicolas Maduro, a feat the 2020 mercenary raid failed to achieve. A yacht purchased by Godreau for $90,000 to transport ammunition and rifles actually sank in the Caribbean before it could even be used in the mission. Venezuelan intelligence admitted they had paid for some of the early coordination meetings of the plotters just to keep the sting operation going. As far as redactions go, when we look at the declassified memos, the black ink is thickest in numerous documents, such as the one titled Intelligence Synchronization Logs. These files contain the heaviest redactions in the entire modern Venezuelan archive, specifically the section on internal infiltration monitoring, which is almost entirely blacked out. Over 2,400 pages of passive asset observation are also missing. Why is the agency hiding exactly how much they watched and permitted this failure to happen? Get ready for the theory of the controlled collapse. Speculation suggests Operation Gideon was designed to fail to expose 2026 traitors within the agency. This theory argues that the CIA knew the mission was a suicide run but allowed it to proceed because they used it as a chemical tracer to see which Venezuelan officers would actually flip and which U.S. officials would try to cover up their fingerprints. Some imagine the 2,400 redacted pages have something to do with a mercenary burn protocol, which hides a darker secret. This theory argues the agency actually funded the failure through a third-party cutout to provide Maduro with a false sense of security, setting him up for the real 2026 capture that took place years later. Theorists looking at the blacked-out sections suggest there might be a communication intercept handoff redaction, and they argue the CIA intentionally fed Godreau, fake intelligence. They claim the redactions hide a 2026 plan where the agency used the mercenaries as human sacrifices to distract the Venezuelan Sabin while the CIA assets were busy planting bugs in the presidential palace. Gossip suggests the black bars have to do with surveillance data analysis, and that there is a section redacted that hide a 2026 experiment where the entire operation was being simulated by a quantum computer in Langley, and the real-world landing was just a way to calibrate the AI's predictive algorithms for future coups. Rumor says the Corporate Sovereignty Agreement redactions hide evidence that Operation Gideon was actually the first test of a 2026 global policy where corporations can legally declare war on sovereign nations to protect their infrastructure. Some believe the 2,400 redacted pages hide a 2026 breakthrough in remote control warfare, that the mercenaries weren't actually in control of their boats, and the agency steered them into the trap from a desk in Florida to ensure the political optics were perfect. Speculation persists that the redactions hide a post-mission debrief section, which proves the CIA used the failure to identify and eliminate rogue agents who had been moonlighting for private security firms without official permission. Fringe gossip argues the redacted sections describe a 2026 project where the entire invasion was filmed by a covert documentary crew to be used as a training film for how not to conduct a regime change. Whispers from the dark web suggest the redacted sections hide an operational overlap file, which proves that in 2026 the agency discovered one of the mercenaries was actually a triple agent working for a third unknown country, and the 2,400 pages are a frantic attempt to track where he went after he disappeared from the beach. A wild theory claims the missing 2,400 pages describe invisible drones that were scanning the retinas of every Venezuelan soldier on the beach to build a target list for the successful raid that eventually followed. Conspiracy enthusiasts argue that the succession planning redactions hide the CIA's secret that Juan Guaido, who signed the contract, was actually a body double, and the real one has been living in a Project Gentleman safe house since 2017. Lastly, some whispers suggest the redactions are so heavy because they prove the 2026 world is shifting toward a model of intentional chaos, and Operation Gideon was the prototype for a new era where the failure is the mission. Was Operation Gideon a success? Tactically, it was an utter disaster. Not a single objective was met. And the tactical errors were so basic they were described as suicidal. Strategically, it was a paradox. For the Maduro regime, it was a massive propaganda victory. For the CIA, it served as a vivid warning about the dangers of using unvetted private contractors for high-stake geopolitics. However, as the 2026 capture of Maduro proves, the data gathered during this failure may have provided the precise intelligence needed for the eventual military success. As far as technological and operational breakthroughs are concerned, the Bay of Pigs 2.0 led to breakthroughs that redefined modern intervention, such as counter-infiltration doctrine, advanced methods for detecting when a private op has been compromised by foreign intelligence, low signature small craft deployment, the realization that fiberglass boats are nearly invisible to certain older radar systems, a tactic the agency perfected for the 2026 raid. Contractor vetting standards, the creation of the 2026 private force audit system to prevent rogue contractors from dragging the U.S. into unwanted wars, and signal intelligence gap analysis, identifying the exact frequency ranges the Venezuelan military uses to communicate during coastal incursions. Operation Gideon reminds us that in the world of shadows, the loudest bang is often just a distraction. As the files reveal, some men sail for glory and find only a prison cell, while others watch the wreckage from a distance, waiting for the tide to turn. Thanks for listening, and join us next time as we examine Project Longshot. In the 1980s, the agency and NASA looked beyond the Earth to the nearest stars. We'll uncover the nuclear pulse blueprints, the Century Mission Manifest, and the moment the world realized that to truly see our enemies, we might have to leave the solar system entirely. Join us next time for The Century Spy. In the meantime, I'll see you in the archives.